My name is Thomas Harrison, and I'm the chairman of the Department of Italian here at UCLA. I wanted to introduce this conference by referring to a book that was recently written by the Harvard historian Jill Lepore. It's called The Story of America, in which she says that nations are not only places, but, quote, also acts of imagination, end quote. They're thought up, constructed, legislated, governed with certain objectives in mind. Now, of the world's nations and states, California is among the most imagined, the most jointly possessed as a fantasy. In fact, when I'm in Italy and I tell people I live in California, the reaction is, ah! And I never got that when I lived in New York or Chicago. There's something about California that is, in fact, a world fantasy. And it reminds me also of the related case of the Wild West, the Far West, which is another jointly held fantasy of Europeans. It's not an American reality, it's a European one. As a matter of fact, our idea of cowboys and gunslingers today is disproportionately indebted to Italians, or at least one of them, Sergio Leone. When we think cowboys now, we think Badlands. And we think of the movies Leone made with Clint Eastwood. Our gun-toting image of the West is scored in our minds by Ennio Morricone. The Western imaginary has been indelibly stamped by the movies, and there, preeminently by the Italians. But still, California is a special case, for this land originates as a fantasy. Here is one place that was already thought up in the European mind before any Spaniard, Italian, or Frenchman ever set foot here. Many of you know that the myth of California is a literary myth. But for those of you who don't, let me just summarize it for you briefly. Cervantes' fictional character, Don Quixote, world famous, his favorite writer was a man who really existed, called Garci Rodriguez de Montalvo. This de Montalvo was a best-selling author of chivalric romances, and those romances served as Quixote's code of manners, because they recounted the peerless exploits of the knight Amadis de Gaula. Everybody in the 16th century, and a little earlier than that even, read this book, not only Cervantes and his fictional character Don Quixote. A sequel to that most famous book, Amadis of Gaul, was called The Adventures of Esplanadian, and was published in 1510. One of the most memorable scenes in this book tells of a fictional island, paradise, peopled only by women, and ruled by the beautiful virgin queen Calafia. Know ye, writes the chivalric author Montalvo, that at the right hand of the Indies there is an island called California, very close to that part of the terrestrial paradise, which was inhabited by black women without a single man among them, and they lived in the manner of Amazons. They were robust of body, with strong, passionate hearts, and great virtue. The island itself is one of the wildest in the world on account of the bold and craggy rocks. This island was also inhabited by griffins, and of course you guessed it, the only metal on the island was gold. Now, with great fleets of hostile Californians, the Queen Calafia sails away from the island to join the Muslims who were intent on taking Constantinople away from the Christians. And there, of course, she's defeated in single man-to-woman combat, in this case, by the great king Amadis. And after she's taken prisoner, the queen, of course, converts to Christianity, marries a cousin of Esplanadian, and returns with her women and their spouses to California to inaugurate a new bisexual Christian dynasty that is as close as you can get to the terrestrial paradise in the minds of the Europeans as possible. Before it was a little savage, and now it has been domesticated.
To mention one aspect that is also very important, which is that as Italians were coming to California, and as the immigration was growing, also the attention and the interest of Italian institutions to California grew in parallel, let's say, with the increase of flow of immigrants, but also with the increase of importance of this state and of the city of Los Angeles and San Francisco in particular. And that's why in 1901 the Italians opened their first presence in the city of Los Angeles with what was called Agenzia Consolare, a consular agency. His name was Giacomo Scipione Castruccio, and he opened this first office that with the years became more and more important. So there was an upgrade in the presence of the Italian government representation here in Los Angeles, just to reflect the growing importance of the city and the growing importance of the role that the Italians were playing in the city. And so the office became, with time, a vice consulate, then it became a consulate, and then up to the 60s when it became the Consolato Generale that it is today. And so basically, this presence grew in parallel, I would say. When in the 20s and 30s the city expanded, then there was the first upgrade. And then there was, of course, the interruption for World War II, but then the presence resumed and it got stronger and it covered more and more space, more sectors, because the Italian interest here in Los Angeles and in Southern California became more and more multi-sectoral, let's say.
The Los Angeles Italian-American experience is a chapter of local history that reveals both the multi-layered fabric that is Los Angeles, as well as the complexity of the Italian-American diaspora. My presentation will examine Greater Los Angeles' tangled and hidden Italian roots and explain how the region's geography, both physical and cultural, helped create one of the most upwardly mobile Italian-American populations in the nation. It will also consider the role that geography, geopolitics, campanilismo or regionalism, and the peasant psyche played in the development of a fragmented identity and the early dissolution of Italian enclaves. In the introduction to my book, I state that while the job of a historian can be likened to that of a detective, chronicling Los Angeles' Italian history is more aptly compared to chasing ghosts. From transportation to finance, the entertainment industry to agriculture, Italian Americans have made significant contributions in the development of Los Angeles. Yet very little memorializes this. My presentation will showcase the history that is absent from both local history texts and volumes of Italian Americana. It will highlight the historic Italian neighborhoods that have been masked by subsequent ethnic settlements or erased from the map entirely as a consequence of redevelopment. Finally, my presentation will identify the Italian American Museum as a repository for this history, as well as a portal to the past, a mirror of the present, and an avenue through which we can actively participate in constructing an Italo-Angelino future. When we think of Italian immigration into the United States, seldom is Los Angeles the city that comes to mind. Usually we imagine New York City's Mulberry Street at the turn of the century, and Italian immigrant families crowded into single-room tenements. While the story of Italians in Los Angeles contains some similarities with that of Italians who settled elsewhere in the country, what makes our history as Los Angeles Italians truly remarkable is the numerous ways in which it differs from that of our compatriots. To understand LA's Italians, one must understand both the forces that motivated large-scale Italian immigration, as well as the history of Los Angeles and California. Let's begin with the history of which we are both familiar, that of the impoverished masses. Between 1876 and 1914, fleeing what was collectively referred to as La Miseria, 16 million people departed from Italy. It is believed that no other country has experienced a greater hemorrhaging of its people in an equal span of time. The impoverished Mezzogiorno, or southern Italy, its punitive taxes and natural disasters, including earthquakes that leveled entire villages, proved an especially unforgiving land. In Basilicata, for instance, and that's this little blue region here, malaria outbreaks killed up to 25% of the population. When fortunate enough to find work, the average laborer made only 31 cents for a 12-hour day. a wage that appears even bleaker when you consider that sugar costs 19 cents a pound.